On the 10th of September of 2015, Super Mario Maker was released, and it took the community less than a year to upload millions of Mario Maker levels that had been played several hundred millions of times. Super Mario Maker ended up becoming the 7th best-selling game on the Wii U and single-handedly launched a franchise that sold millions and millions of copies. The original Super Mario Maker just ended up being an incredibly interesting and vastly successful experimental game that spawned a huge community around it. And then, Nintendo killed the game. As of today, all the great stages that the community had created over the years are inaccessible, and the game is practically dead. A decade after its original release, the original Super Mario Maker is pretty much no longer playable, and the game that launched this wonderful franchise is already slowly becoming forgotten. In this video, we're going to change that for once. We're going to take a look back at the original Super Mario Maker. We're going to discuss 5 specific aspects of the original game that are nowadays often overlooked, but that, at least in my humble opinion, are still very much relevant for the current franchise and especially its future. 5 aspects that made the original Super Mario Maker so great, and that I hope people do not forget about the game. So gentle ladies, gentlemen, and gentle people in general, are you ready? Then let's do this. Alrighty right, so where do we best start our look back at the original Mario Maker? Well, what better place to start than with the very first look that the public ever got of the game. Super Mario Maker was first released over 11 years ago at E3 2014. The very first look that the public ever got of the game was just a short 1.5 minute trailer. A very short trailer that nowadays is incredibly interesting. You see, back in 2014, Mario Maker was still in development. So much in development, as a matter of fact, that the trailer shows us an early build of the game. An early build of the game that is vastly different to the game that Nintendo would eventually release. So first, the graphics obviously changed compared to the first showcase. Back then, the eraser tool was just a boring eraser. It didn't even have eyes. Can you imagine? The ground was only placeable in squares that could be dragged into shapes which, thankfully, didn't make it into the final game. And worst of all, oh, the blasphemy. Pipes could be changed in size by dragging them from the top and from the bottom. A true pipe disgrace. But that is not the reason why we're talking about this trailer. The reason is something different. The reason is a little element that we can see at the top left here. The mushroom in a question block. As it turns out, in early builds of the game, mushrooms in a question block were not created by dragging a mushroom onto a question block, but by placing a mushroom in a question block item from the menu. And I think that this is incredibly interesting for a very simple reason, because being able to drag a mushroom into a question block to me is the very essence of the original Super Mario Maker. Dragging a mushroom into a question block is the very essence of the franchise. The mere existence of a default mushroom in a question block item to me is against the very idea of Super Mario Maker. Here's the thing, Super Mario Maker is most often referred to as a level editor, and that is obviously correct. But at least in my humble opinion, Super Mario Maker is not merely a level editor, because the level editor is also part of the game. All the elements in it are rather simple on the surface. It's just elements like a question block or a mushroom. The thing that makes creating levels in Mario Maker so interesting is that all these elements interact with each other in surprising and unique ways. If we put a mushroom into a question block, we get the very element that we saw in the trailer. But if we put a mushroom onto a Goomba, we get a bigger Goomba. If we put it in a bullet bill, we get a bullet bill that shoots mushrooms. If we combine it with wings, we get a flying mushroom. If we put it into a Lakitu cloud, we get a mushroom operated Lakitu cloud. If we put a mushroom onto a spring, we get a mushroom that jumps out as soon as the game loads. And if we put a mushroom onto a ground block, then a mushroom can't spawn, which sounds useless at first glance, but it is actually quite handy, since we can destroy this block by other means, which eventually makes it possible for the mushroom to spawn later. And that's not even all. Take the bullet bill with a mushroom that we just created. We can now take this bullet bill and spawn block it, or put it into a Lakitu cloud to create a mushroom puking flying bullet bill, or put it onto a conveyor belt to have it move around, or copy it 10 times while on conveyor belts to create a moving train, and so on. The original Super Mario Maker doesn't feature that many different elements, but what it lacks in variety, it sure makes up by allowing allowing us to remix and match all those elements together in many surprising ways. This is the biggest strength of the original Mario Maker's level editor. Because of this interactability, the level editor doesn't feel like a level editor at all, but more like an experimental playground in which we can mix and match all the different elements to create new and surprising ways to play. And this is where the early trailer comes back into the picture again. You see, this trailer was released roughly a year before the game's original release. A year of development isn't that much time, and yet the very first scenes of Mario Maker that the public ever got to see, scenes that were shown roughly a year before the game released, show a complete lack of the very thing that, in my opinion, is the very essence of Mario Maker. There are no big enemies, meaning that they probably haven't come up with dragging mushrooms onto enemies yet, and the very fact that there is a mushroom in a question block shown means that they probably haven't even come up with the idea of being able to drag enemies and items into question blocks at the time of the trailer. A year before release, the shown build of Mario Maker was still lacking central elements that actually make Mario Maker so remarkable in the first place. This trailer always had me wonder if the many interactions between the elements in Mario Maker were actually planned from the beginning, or if they were just the result of a happy accident that happened late in development. But whatever the case, this is the very first aspect of the original Mario Maker that I'd like to highlight. The many different interactions between the elements that really elevate the level editor. Hooray! So what is the second thing? From our apparently still ongoing series, what is the most complicated way to trigger a P-switch? I proudly present to you the Anniversary Edition. Alright. So how did this work? Well, it is honestly, actually, surprisingly simply. This entire contraption starts to work as soon as Mario grabs a mushroom. The reason the mushroom activates the machine is super trivial. There are exactly 99 mushrooms hidden on top. This mushroom here is the 100th, meaning that as long as this mushroom is on screen, the pipe on top can't spawn a new one because the entity limit C is full. Once collected, however, there is room in the ELC and this mushroom can spawn. This mushroom then hits a node block containing a muncher. The muncher drops down, booming a bob-omb along the way and activating a node block containing a shell. The boom did get rid of this block, dropping down this bullet bill, which in turn booms this bob-omb, which drops this cannon onto a node block, which makes it jump upwards. The shell we spawned earlier now drives on top of this firing elevator and leaves it once we reach this spot. The cannon now booms this bob-omb right in time for this block to open up so that this shell can travel upwards and trigger those question blocks, which in the process booms another poor waddling bomb and drops this blaster onto a conveyor belt. The blaster now picks up this slightly confused Koopa until it reaches this clown car. Here, the Koopa drops through the clown car to its own surprise, only to be pushed onto a node block by a conveyor belt soon after. The node block elevates the Koopa up to the next layer, where it activates a shell by dropping down a spring, which lifts this bullet bill, once again destroying a poor bomb. This explosion, however, also destroys this block, dropping down this muncher, and hooray! A P-switch was triggered, trapping Mario for eternity. For 480 seconds. So why are we taking a look at this entirely useless contraption? I hear you ask. Well, first, because it is fun, obviously. But second, because this little contraption actually shows something really remarkable about the very nature of the first Super Mario Maker. You see, this entire machine here is a ridiculously complex way to perform a trivial task. And it is this complexity that I find really interesting, because no single action of the contraption is necessarily complex to begin with. All the interactions that lead to this overly complicated outcome are actually simple on the surface. It's stuff like, if a spring hits a shell, it launches it. If a shell hits a question block, it triggers it. If a bullet bill is on top of a question block, when it is triggered, it gets lifted in the air. If a bob-omb is crushed, it immediately explodes. If a bob-omb explodes, it destroys blocks around it. If something stands on a block that is destroyed, it drops down, and so on. All of those little interactions are incredibly simple on the surface, and yet if we combine all those simple interactions, we can come up with a ridiculously complicated contraption. The complexity that makes this machine possible is a result of many little simple interactions. And that's the second aspect that I really want to highlight about the original Super Mario Maker. The original Super Mario Maker allows for incredibly complex systems to be created in it. Over the years, we created turn-based systems and combination locks in it, or logic gates. We found dozens of ways to murder Mario depending on his behavior and build working calculators. It is possible to build incredibly complex systems in Super Mario Maker, but all those systems at their core are still built upon incredibly simple and intuitive interactions, like that a shell triggers a question block or that a node block drops its content if anything steps onto it. In the original Super Mario Maker, it is simplicity that leads to complexity. Everything in the game is easy to grasp, and yet it can be combined to do really astonishing things, which is the second thing about the original Super Mario Maker that we're going to highlight today. Super Mario Maker achieves complexity via simplicity, another thing that made the original Mario Maker so special, at least in my humble opinion, which already brings us to the third aspect of the game that we're going to highlight. So that one is a bit of a weird one. I honestly struggle a bit on how to best to communicate what I mean here. You see, the thing is, levels in the original Mario Maker had more of a physical presence than the levels in other level creators have. Mario Maker's levels had more of an actual entityness outside of the game. But it's probably easier to explain to you why I believe this to be the case than to explain what I mean in the first place. So let's go back to the start here. There are two main things that I believe were causing original Mario Maker levels to feel more like entities that exist outside the game world. Luckily, both are super simple to explain. The first one is that it was possible to download stages in Super Mario Maker and to check them out in the editor. They removed this feature in Mario Maker 2, likely because it happened every once in a while that someone used the download feature to steal a popular level of another creator and to upload it as their own, but at least in my opinion that was a mistake, because the mere fact that people were able to download levels gave the levels a certain sense of existence. People were able to download difficult queso stages and to practice them in the editor, adding an additional layer to all the difficult queso stages. People were able to download interesting contraption levels and to study them to understand how they work, adding another potential dimension of teaching to the levels. And finally, people were able to download levels they really liked, to save them and to maybe remix those stages into something new, which further added to the feeling that the stage is more than just a level code that points to some place on Nintendo's servers. The second thing, well, that is quite obviously the bookmarking site. The original Super Mario Maker featured an online bookmarking site, which featured every level ever uploaded to Super Mario Maker servers and allowed users to easily share the levels over the web. This little innocently looking bookmarking page did a ton of work for the game. First, it obviously made it easy to share stages on places like Reddit or Discord, which is an obvious plus for obviously obvious reasons, but second, and equally important, it also created a place in which Mario Maker levels existed outside of the game, and this really added to the entire experience, because it gave every level an additional entity or physical presence or whatever you want to call it that just added weight to the stage. An original Mario Maker level was something that was not entirely restricted to only existing within the rule set of the game. You know, every stage was displayed there with its clear rate and information, how many people played it, alongside a nice little thumbnail. The site showed a level overview alongside the me face and the nationality of the creator. It was a place in which the stages existed outside of the game that made it possible to interact with the game in unique ways. If I was waiting for the bus, I was able to pull out the bookmarking page and to look at how many likes my stage had gotten while waiting. Heck, it even was possible to read the comments that people left on the stage there, adding a small layer of a social media platform to Mario Maker. If we were bored while away from the game, it was possible to browse the site for interesting levels to play once we got back home. And if we were out with friends chatting about the game, the site made it possible to pull out a phone and to show our friend an overview over the level we were waffling about. The bookmarking page broke the confinement of levels to only exist within the game. It really added to the feeling of a level existing as an entity. This combined with the lack of an option to download levels by other creators just made stages in Mario Maker 2 feel more like, well, like a series of letters that have to be entered in Mario Maker to load something that doesn't really exist outside of the game. And yeah, this feeling of weight and of levels really existing is something that the original Mario Maker really excelled at, something that the sequel lost to some degree in my opinion. This is the third aspect of the original Mario Maker that we're highlighting today. Hooray! Which already brings us to Let's take a look at this little stage here. Here our plumber finds himself in a rather unusual castle that Bowser built to murder him. At first glance, everything seems quite peaceful here. There's a P-switch which Mario can't reach to his left and a couple of lethally burning lava balls. A normal day in the life of a plumber. But, oh and no, what is this? The exit of the stage is magically locked. It looks as if Mario has to explore into another direction first. Luckily for him, the previously locked room at the beginning suddenly magically opened up, allowing him to reach the P-switch. Our plumber decides to trigger it. After all, nothing bad has ever happened because a P-switch got triggered. And, would you look at this? All of a sudden, the floor exploded. Concerning. To make matters even worse, a gigantic bullet bill now blocks the path forward, forcing us to dodge the lethal lava bubble until it finally sank below the lava current. Luckily, however, the sudden ground explosion also seems to have removed the other bullet bill that was blocking the exit, allowing Mario to finally drop the huge axe of his desire and to escape. Hooray! So how did this little level work? Well, it's actually incredibly simple. The bullet bill here disappears because the first time we load it, there's an invisible question block activated below it. In Mario Maker 2, this would have destroyed the bullet bill, but in the original, it doesn't, meaning this bullet bill is now on a spot with a question block, which means it can't load in again, which is how we got rid of it the second time we entered this area. The bullet bill that suddenly appears uses the same idea, just in reverse. The first time that we enter this area, it is spawn blocked by the blocks on the ground. Those are gone the second time, however, since the bob arms on the ground exploded. And how did we explode those little guys? Well, by using a really interesting mechanic that I'm personally quite fond of for reasons that we'll talk about in a moment. You see, bob arms get ignited as soon as they come in contact with any fire source in the game. And as it turns out, this is also true for the lava ground in the castle stage. As soon as a bob arm touches the exceptionally hot liquid on the ground, it goes boom. Since the waddling boom bots are standing on brick blocks here, this is the case as soon as a P-switch is triggered. P-switches famously turn brick blocks into shiny yet deadly coins, dropping the bob arms into the lava and destroying the floor. Awesome. So why are we waffling about the fact that bob arms get ignited whenever they come in contact with any fire source in the game? I hear you ask. Well, here's the thing. As it turns out, I still remember the exact moment when I fell in love with the original Super Mario Maker. It was a couple of weeks after release and I was tinkering around with ideas for puzzle stages when all of a sudden I made a discovery that back in the day felt revolutionary to me. All of a sudden I realized that bob arms could be ignited by literally every source of fire in the game. Back in the day, this realization really blew me away because there are a lot more fire sources in the game than one would expect. It was this very idea that I ended up building my puzzle stage around. So the level is sadly no longer online because no level is, but the general idea was the following. Yoshi is actually able to swallow fire and to puke it back out at socially opportune moments later again. Those fireballs that Yoshi pukes are a fire source, meaning that they are capable of igniting bob arms as well. That was the central idea for the puzzles, and thus the level was an increasingly escalating gauntlet of rooms that first taught the players this mechanic by trapping them in a room with nothing but a fire source and a bob arm, and later required them to realize that Yoshi can also eat fire by swallowing a burning burner or even a fire bar, until in the end they had to guide a fireball through several sub-worlds to a final puzzle. It was a fun stage entirely built out of the idea that, say it with me, bob arms can be ignited by every fire source in the game. But this stage is not the only thing that came out of this unbelievable discovery, because this shocking revelation actually made me so excited that it made me order a capture card and record my very first YouTube video, because I just had to share the news with the rest of the world.
You can ignite bob arms with literally any fire source within the game. And yes, I know, I already said this, but there are some that aren't that obvious, and I thought I'd show them to you. For example, you can ignite bob arms with your own fire flower, fire power, fireball.
Peak YouTube right there. It's only been downhill for me from that peak onwards. So it might be funny to look at this 10 years later. Nowadays we take mechanics like this just as granted. But back in the day, that was actually a really interesting discovery. A discovery that made me fall in love with the game. And it's the fourth and final aspect out of our 5 aspects that I want to highlight about the original Mario Maker. Because here's the thing, level creation in itself is not a very enjoyable task. It is a lot of back and forth and endless testing and it takes forever to create a nice looking stage that other people actually experience as fun to play. If Super Mario Maker were just a tool to create levels in, it would never have taken off as it has. After all, there have been tons of fan-made Mario level creators before Mario Maker ever hit the shelves, but none of them made it even close to the mainstream. And it's not only true for the Mario franchise, by the way. There really aren't many level creators out there that ever got massively popular. Mario Maker really is one of very few level generation games that really sold a lot of copies. Which kinda raises a question, doesn't it? Why is level creation so enjoyable in Mario Maker when level creation itself doesn't seem to be a massively popular genre? And this is where a couple of things pop up again that we discussed so far. I believe it is mainly because the level creation in Mario Maker is driven by discovery. And these discoveries in itself are incredibly enjoyable. The thing that makes creating levels in Mario Maker so fun is the fact that all the elements interact in such unique and often surprising ways. Surprising ways that allow us to discover mechanics for ourselves. It is the feeling of discovery that makes the level creation enjoyable. The many different interactions between the elements and the fact that all of the complexity is the result of very simple rules leads to a system in which it is just permanently possible to discover new tricks and new ideas. And that is the fourth and final aspect of the original Mario Maker that we're going to highlight today. That its level creation is not enjoyable because it has so many options, but that the level creation is so enjoyable because there is so much to discover. Those discoveries are what made me fall in love with the game in the first place. Awesome. And with this, we already reached the end of our little list. It's finally time for the big plot twist. So please ensure that you're currently well seated, and if not, you might want to grab something stable fast, because the next revelation is surely going to knock you off your feet otherwise. You see, as a matter of fact, I lied to you. You were tricked by evil clickbait, because as a matter of fact, this video is not only a nostalgic look back at the original Super Mario Maker. Oh no, as a matter of fact, this video is something much darker. Because in truth, this video is actually a wish list for core design principles that I wish for Super Mario Maker to heavily lean into. 4 design lessons learned by the original Mario Maker that I wish to see more of in Mario Maker 3. So let's drop the act and let's reveal the true nature of this silly little video. Very cinematic. So the 4 design principles that I hope Mario Maker 3 learns from the original game are maximal interactions between elements, complexity through simplicity, stages that exist as entities beyond the game, and fourth and finally, discovery as the main form of play in level creation. Those 4 things are things that I feel the original Mario Maker did to varying degrees better than its sequel. And those 4 things are things that I hope Nintendo embraces more within the core design of the next iteration of Mario Maker. Awesome. So anything left to say? Well, yes, obviously, we still have to talk about the 5th and final aspect of the original Mario Maker. What is this all about? Well, that one is all about endings. Nintendo wasn't very kind to the original Super Mario Maker, and I really feel that this needs to be mentioned in a look back at the original game. In 2021, Nintendo disabled the option to upload new levels entirely. Less than 6 years after the original release of the game, the backbone of the service was already shut down, and Nintendo even stopped selling the game online. Even worse, in 2024, Nintendo shut down the servers for good, meaning that all the millions of levels that the community created over the years are now no longer accessible. They didn't preserve the stages in any way. They didn't port them over to Mario Maker 2. They just pulled the plug and erased an entire part of gaming and internet culture history. Only 9 years after release, there was no Mario Maker around anymore. And alongside this shutdown, they also took down the bookmarking page, erasing even the last memories of all the stages in the game, and the millions of comments that people wrote and the many stories that the community had to tell. So first, that's obviously way too soon. It should still be possible to play and to upload levels in the original game, and it should be so for many years to come. Turning off an entire online game that soon after release as a company like Nintendo is just... it's a decision. So since this video is all about what I hope that Nintendo learns from the original Mario Maker going forward, here's the 5th and final thing. I really hope that Nintendo conserves the wonderful levels that people uploaded in Mario Maker 2 this time, and that the servers remain active and alive for decades to come. Hooray. So Are we really going to end this video on such a downer? Are we really ending this video with Mario Maker's way too early death? Well, no, because as it turns out, there is a secret sixth and final aspect of the original Super Mario Maker that has been hiding from us all along. I know, lots of plot twists today. How exciting. So what is this sixth and final secret aspect of the original Mario Maker? Well, it is the one thing that I'm certain the next iteration of Mario Maker will share with the original game. It is Mario Maker's unbelievably great community. Because while Nintendo was firmly determined to kill their own game unceremoniously and for good, the community actually begged to differ and plotted to give Mario Maker the farewell it truly deserved. You see, when the ability to upload courses was disabled, a group of incredibly dedicated people in the community quickly formed, a group now known as Team 0%. The goal of Team 0%, well, to clear every single stage that was ever uploaded to Super Mario Maker at least once, and thus they started playing. In October of 2023, Nintendo announced that they would close the servers for good in a couple of months, meaning that beating every single stage at least once all of a sudden became a race against time. At that time, there were still roughly 25,000 courses online that no one had ever beaten. A month before the shutdown, this number was down to roughly 200. On April 5th, 2024, Mario Maker user Xenix91SMM2 actually did the impossible. He cleared the last remaining stage called The Last Dance. Only 3 days before the servers finally shut down, the community actually managed to clear the very last level, meaning that any level that ever got uploaded by any person onto Mario Maker servers got beaten at least once. So I'm a bit sad that Mario Maker servers aren't online anymore, but I also have to say that I do not think that there is any cooler way to go for a game than with the entire community up in arms, tightly racing against time, trying to achieve an idea that was originally born because so many level creators uploaded their stages, but no one ever bothered to beat them. A tight race that ends with the community succeeding only days before the shutdown. I don't think that any online game ever got shut down in a more epic way. And even though it is sad that Mario Maker is no longer online, whenever I think about how sad it is, I also have to smile about the fact that we know with certainty that every level that ever got uploaded got at least beaten once. Hooray! So here we have it, a look forward back at the original Mario Maker. Before we wrap this silly little video up, just two more things. So first, a gigantic thank you to all my incredible patrons whose names are currently flapping by. Those wonderful people not only regularly get access to small bonus content and little additional scripts, but their generous support is also the fuel that is fueling videos like this one, which is probably best described as me struggling to grasp the concept of a numbered list. A huge thank you to them for that. Second, well, as some of you might have already noticed, this little video is actually not the second half of the video about whether Bonanza can be beaten goldless that I teased last time. Oh dear, what had happened here? Well, as it turns out, we weren't the only ones digging through Bonanza's dangerous golden depths, because a wonderful gaming champ, fittingly named GameChamp 3000, has also been tackling the very same challenge. A wonderful channel that I can wholeheartedly recommend to every single one of you if you enjoy challenge runs in games. So I don't know exactly when his Bonanza Goldless video will be out, but I figured it doesn't make much sense for me and for him to release what is essentially the same video, potentially on the same day, and thus I decided to put the Bonanza challenge video back into the oven for a bit. I'll be cooking on it for a bit longer, and I'm going to see if there are any new groundbreaking discoveries by the community within the next couple of weeks before returning to the idea. Awesome. So thank you so much for watching this little video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up and maybe feel especially like the 6th point in a 4-point long list today and want to hit the subscribe button as well. Finally, if you truly love this video and want to support content like this, then there is also the option to support the channel via Patreon. See you next time. Lots of hugs.